Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, inshallah, we are discussing the restoration period. It's a new actually age or period in literature, in poetry. Of course, we are focusing on poetry. Okay, so what was the restoration period? We want to know when it started, when it finished, and why do we call it the restoration period, and what examples of poetry in this period. Okay. The restoration period lasted from 1660 to around 1688. So that's only about 28 years, less than 30 years. And it has the name of restoration because of the crowning of Charles II, and hence restoring the traditional English monarchical form of government following a short period of rule by a handful of Republican governments. So before the Republican governments, the type of rule was a monarchy. And you have the prince or the king of this monarchy. كانت عبارة عن إمارة الحكم عندهم. Okay? But after that, a group of people rebelled or revolted against the kings, and they started the Republican governments. صار أصبح عندنا حكومات. Now, in the restoration period, okay, another group of people who were advocating the monarchy restored that monarchy and deleted the Republican governments. Okay? So in 1688, James II, who is Charles' brother, okay, was removed from the throne, which many scholars used to mark the end of Restoration literature. So the Restoration period started with Charles II becoming the king, okay, in 1660, and ended with his brother James II being removed from the throne in 1688. Okay. Now let's come to the political context around this period. The restoration of Charles II has a particularly defining influence on the literature that was written in the second half of the 17th century. Of course, the political situation, الوضع السياسي, would affect literature and what the writers and the poets wrote at that time. The political events of the previous decades resulted in a tremendous turmoil for the English people. Yes, because the people were actually going through wars. Some of them are civil wars, okay? That affected the people badly, okay? So also, of course, when you affect people in one direction, this will also affect the literature and the topics that the writers wrote about. The divisions between those who supported a more traditional form of government and those who wanted the Republican form of government before the Restoration, that created tensions, okay? That created tensions. And those tensions resulted in the English Civil War. And this war is ended by beheading of Charles I in 1649. And from 1649 to 1659, various forms of Republican government ruled Britain. So this is the idea of the turmoil for the English, or tremendous turmoil for the English people before the Restoration. So there was a civil war. There was a civil war between the supporters of the monarchy and the supporters of the Republican government. Okay, fine. So in 1660, Charles II became king, and this is the Restoration period, okay, because they restored the English monarchy. After Charles II died in 1685, his brother James II took over the throne. Afraid of the policies James II might introduce, William III removed James II in 1688 and took over the English throne in 1689, and this is the end of the Restoration. So it started with Charles II, succeeded by his brother James II, but removed from throne by William III, and this is the end of the restoration. Now coming to the philosophical context, that was the political context. The philosophical context, here we focus on thought. Okay, the start of the restoration period coincides with something called enlightenment, okay, which continued until the end of the 18th century. The enlightenment, okay, what do you mean by enlightenment and what is the purpose of the enlightenment? It's an emphasis on reason and logic. بتركز كانت على العقل وعلى المنطق في التفكير. The thinkers of the period, moreover, helped develop the modern science that treats the natural world as a knowable and testable subject. So now they are away from legends, from superstitions, from religion. What matters here with the Enlightenment is science. Science rules everything and governs everything. Okay. Now, one of the key figures or key poets during the Restoration time is John Dryden. And John Dryden was a supporter of Charles II, okay? He was a supporter of the monarchy, not the Republican governments, okay? So what was Dryden famous for? Okay, so as a poet, Dryden is best known as a satirist, okay? And was England's first poet laureate in 1668. Satirist, it means يعني ساخر اللي هي السخرية السياسية. In addition to satires, Dryden wrote elegies, odes, sorry, we need O here, just a minute. So he wrote elegies اللي هي المرثيات, odes, يعني قصائد and others. There are other types, but it's enough for these. Okay. So which poem of Dryden was one of the greatest political satires in English? It is a poem titled Absalom and Achitophel. Okay, so we can Absalom or Absalom, okay, and Achitophel or Achitophel. So it's Achitophel because we are talking about ancient language, okay? Now, generally acknowledged as the finest political satire in the English language. It is also described as an allegory regarding يعني رمزية regarding contemporary political events. يعني هي كانت عبارة عن قصيدة ساخرة من طبعا الجانب الآخر في السياسة يعني المنافس السياسي, وكانت عبارة عن صورة رمزية للأوضاع السياسية في ذلك الوقت. And a mock heroic narrative. Now, what do you mean by mock heroic? What does it mean, mock heroic? Okay, let's see what it means. What is mock heroic style? Of course, if you notice heroic, maybe you remember or it reminds you of epics, right? Which was about heroes and their great deeds. Mock means that it is making fun of something. So, mock epic, also called as mock heroic, form of satire that adapts the elevated heroic style of the classical epic poem to a trivial subject. يعني for example, if you I told you about Don Quixote, for example, when we talked about Beowulf, or take Beowulf for example. It is an epic, right? Beowulf was a hero. He was fighting with supernatural powers. He was a courageous man. He saved his country. Now, similar to him fighting the armies and the troops, you would find a mock epic or mock heroic, which is Don Quixote. Now, Don Quixote pretends to be a hero, and he was on a quest to save his mistress and to save his country. So he was fighting with the enemies. Who were the enemies? Actually, the enemies were herds of sheep. قطعان الأغنام، كان لما يشوفهم يفكرهم جيوش جرارة، وكان ينزل بالعصاية تبعته اللي هو معتبرها سيف ويضرب فيهم ويخبط، وإنه إيش بيقتل الأعداء. Another enemy that he saved which is supernatural, not a grendel but it was the mill، طاحونة الهواء، أوكي، ودراعاتها الطويلة تخيلها إنه هي مونستر، وحش، أوكي، وبهاجم فيه وبدأ بالعصاية يقاتل طواحين الهواء اللي في المنطقة اللي هو كان موجود فيها. So this is a mock heroic, okay, so you have the serious matter, okay, but you apply it to a trivial one and you make fun of it, okay, fine. So now let's come to Absalom and Achitophel. طبعا this is a long actually poem, so I took only part of it and then we will focus on discussing general ideas related to it. Okay, so now we will watch and listen to the part that is in your PowerPoint presentation, okay, and then we will go to discuss the poem. Let's start.
Succeeding ages cursed. For close designs and crooked counsels fit, sagacious, in power and public office high, in impenitence, power to which they ferment, work up to foam, and threat the government. Some by their friends, more by themselves thought wise, opposed the power to which they could not rise. Some had in courts been great, and thrown from thence like fiends were hardened in impenitence. Some, by their monarch's fatal mercy, grown from pardoned rebels, kinsmen to the throne, were raised in power and public office high. Strong bands, if bands ungrateful men could tie. Of these the false Achitophel,
okay,
a daring pilot in extremity, pleased with they fretted the pygmy body to decay. And or informed the tenement of clay. A daring pilot in extremity, pleased with the danger when the waves went high, he sought the storms, but for a calm unfit would steer too nigh the sands to boast his wit. Great wits are sure to madness near allied, and thin partitions do their bounds divide. Else why should he, with wealth and honour blessed, refuse his age the needful hours of rest, punish a body which he could not please, bankrupt of life, yet prodigal of ease, and all to leave what with his toil he won to that unfeathered two-legged thing, a son.
We are now in the third slide, okay?
Got while his soul did huddled notions try, and born a shapeless lump, like anarchy. In friendship false, implacable in hate, resolved to ruin or to rule the state. To compass this, the triple bond he broke, the pillars of the public safety shook, and fitted Israel for a foreign yoke. Then, seized with fear, yet still affecting fame, usurped a patriot's all-atoning name. So easy still it proves in factious times with public zeal to cancel private crimes.
Move.
How safe is treason and how sacred ill, where none can sin against the people's will, where crowds can wink and no offence be known, since in another's guilt they find their own. Yet fame deserved no enemy can grudge, the statesman we abhor, but praise the judge. In Israel's courts, ne'er sat an Abbathdin with more discerning eyes or hands more clean. Unbribed, unsought, the wretched to redress, swift of dispatch and easy of access.
Yeah, move now.
Oh, had he been content to serve the crown with virtues only proper to the gown, or had the rankness of the soil been freed from cockle that oppressed the noble seed? David for him his tuneful harp had strung, and heaven had wanted one immortal song. But wild ambition loves to slide, not stand, and fortune's ice prefers to virtue's land. Achitophel, grown weary to possess a lawful fame and lazy happiness, disdained the golden fruit to gather free, and lent the crowd his arm to shake the tree. Now manifest of crimes contrived long since, he stood at bold defiance with his prince, held up the buckler of the people's cause against the crown, and skulked behind the laws. The wished occasion of the plot he takes, some circumstances finds, but more he makes. By buzzing emissaries fills the ears of listening crowds with jealousies and fears of arbitrary counsels brought to light, and proves the king himself a Jebusite. Weak arguments, which yet he knew full well were strong with people easy to rebel. For governed by the moon, the giddy Jews tread the same track when she the prime renews, and once in 20 years their scribes record by natural instinct they change their lord. Achitophel still wants a chief, and none was found so fit as warlike Absalom. Not that he wished his greatness to create, for politicians neither love nor hate, but for he knew his title not allowed would keep him still depending on the crowd, that kingly power thus ebbing out might be drawn to the dregs of a democracy. Him he attempts with studied arts to please, and sheds his venom in such words as these.
Okay, that's the end of this part. Now we will go to our presentation. Okay, so this is the poem. You can read it again if you want, and you can find it on the YouTube as I showed you. Okay, now I will stop here and we will start with a new video to continue with the description and explanation of the poem. Thank you very much.